Hello and welcome, I'm Ali Mustafa and this is a special edition of Strait Talk from Bulgaria, the host nation of the latest EU-Turkey summit. It's been described as the uneasy summit. Leaders of Turkey and the European Union engaged in tense discussions to hash out differences and continue past agreements. The latest high-level talks concluded with no clear breakthrough. Turkey wanted the EU to honor its promise of visa liberalization for Turks and pay the $3.5 billion the EU had promised for Syrian refugees. Meanwhile, European Council President Donald Tusk expressed concerns over the continuing Afrin operation in northern Syria. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan reiterated Ankara's commitment to joining the EU.
Avrupa Birliği ile aramızdaki güvenin yeniden tesisinin ilk adımını bugün burada hep beraber atmış olduğumuzu umuyorum. Ancak bu adımı attık demek yeterli değil, somut olarak atmak gerekiyor.
While Turkey says it is committed to joining the European Union, it can look to the example of how Bulgaria has fared in the EU more than a decade on. It's a country standing on the ruins of the Roman Empire. It connects the East and the West and is torn by the balance. Turkey and Russia still hold much influence, but many here are looking towards Europe to ensure their independence and to forget the painful memories from mistakes of the past. A somber event to mark a dark chapter in Bulgaria's history. 40 years ago, these Pomaks, Muslims of Bulgarian origin, were forced to change their names. Those who resisted were met with an iron fist. The pain is still fresh for Hasan Ahmet Mehmet. His mother was at home in Barutin when the communist purge started on 16 March 1972.
The people gathered and started throwing stones at them. The police began to spray us with water. People scattered around the village, and some went to the ravine. The police followed them and started shooting. My mother was at home. They hit her 5 times on the head with a solid object. My mother died of her injuries. She was 75 years old.
Ati Daudova and her husband tried to escape the communists, but their village was surrounded, so they improvised. Now in her 70s, Daudova takes us to the spot where she hid her husband.
I hid him in this hole. He got in and I covered him with nylon and I placed wood over him. He stayed like that for 24 hours. They didn't find him.
Communist suppression of Bulgaria's Muslims continued for years after the events in Barutin. An estimated 1 million Muslims now live in Bulgaria. Some identify as Pomaks, but the majority have Turkish roots. Onal Lutfi, a leader of the Turkish minority DPS party, was forced to change his name to Yunal Hacıyev. He says the communists employed a strategy of divide and rule.
The most important thing is this: the communist regime was directly discriminating Turkish people because they didn't trust the Turks.
Bulgaria's present-day fault lines have roots in a centuries-old power play between the Russians and the Turks. Bulgarians have had to take sides. In 1947, they opted for communism. It was a partnership that would last for decades. A golden age, according to Mincho Menchev and his octogenarian comrades. They're what's left of the New Dawn Party, one of 3 communist groups still active in Bulgaria.
In Bulgaria, communism for the 40 years had huge successes.
Our big problem now is demographic catastrophes.
Comrade Minchev and his fellow communists aren't the only ones reminiscing about Bulgaria's Soviet past. The past is still present for a new, younger generation. 28-year-old Georgi has turned his curiosity into a thriving business. The Rakate restaurant takes patrons on a journey through Soviet archives and memorabilia.
I think nostalgia comes from the fact that this time is somehow forgotten, and that's why. When you see the thing with your eyes, there's nostalgia. There is nothing political here. This nostalgia is not politically oriented. This period had its problems, but it recreates a coziness, a feeling in people that makes them feel good. It gives them a sense of warmth from this time.
Nostalgia is a way for the youth to reconcile the past with the present. But as for the future, Bulgaria faces growing uncertainty. Bulgaria has the unenviable title of being the world's fastest shrinking country, with more than 2 million Bulgarians having left since the collapse of communism. Those who've decided to stay back are raising their voice on a variety of issues, especially the youth, who are now becoming part of global activist movements. A dance between light and darkness. Onlookers enjoy the warmth of the flames, and the drums heighten the intensity in this communal celebration of a global event. I'm standing here in the heart of Sofia at Bulgaria's National Theatre, and in a few minutes all the lights behind me will go out to mark Earth Hour. It's a global movement that many young Bulgarians want to be part of, but conserving energy isn't the only thing on their minds.
Corruption on every level. I don't really want to talk about it because it's a crucial thing.
I don't like politics. It divides people, okay?
The politicians must be like, I don't know, must be put on a stake, you know? Yeah.
Politics and corruption have become a rallying call for Bulgarians. A decade after joining the European Union, Bulgaria is at the bottom of its corruption index. Some people say the EU has gone soft on corruption in the country, but others feel it's the Bulgarians who must change their ways. Enter Slavi Trifonov, one of Bulgaria's most iconic entertainers. On his show, he hosts musicians and takes on politicians. And now Trifonov wants to have a go at corruption. He says it can't be business as usual.
The main mistake of Bulgarian politicians at the moment is that they are not acting hard enough to represent the interests of the country. Bulgarian citizens deserve a better life and deserve to be proud of who they are. A new political formation will put the right context which is needed by the people at the moment. And if they see the future and if they are happy with their lives, yes, we will not have a shrinking population.
But the need to stand up against corruption goes beyond publicity from elite entertainers. It's galvanized activists like Manol Glishev. He led the 2014 occupation of Sofia University over corrupt practices, but says people are resigned to political realities.
They don't think they have a mandate to this country. Government thinks that they have the mandate to steal money and to keep businesses in governmental hands. They're trying to keep big private businesses within pro-government hands, which we call corruption usually, and so there is no such a thing as a societal mandate of government. When in Bulgaria you're talking about politicians, you don't usually say, but they must act, they must do something. You say, oh, they do very well for themselves.
An unwavering elite and an aging population has provided Risto Komerninsky with ample material for his daily caricatures. The cartoonist says satire provides a natural release from realities that are hard to change.
There are fundamental cracks in the society on this line, this contradiction. Our country seems unrelated, unfocused, wandering. People are confused about which community they belong to, whether they are Europeans or they are closer to Russia. This is generally the state of our society.
1 in 5 adults, or 1.3 million Bulgarians, are thought to have either paid or received a bribe. But in 2015, only 72 corruption cases were settled in court. That year, Risto Ivanov quit as Bulgaria's justice minister over failed judicial reforms. He's formed a new political party, Yes Bulgaria, to fight what he says is corruption rooted in Bulgaria's communist past. A corrupt past which is now part of the deep state.
Bulgarian citizens were hoping that, we join forces with Brussels, and then we're able to sort of balance the equation and sort of push Bulgaria into the right direction. Brussels then, for political reasons, discovered that it's much more easier and comfortable to deal with the leadership of Bulgaria. You get the Bulgarian Prime Minister always to vote together with the Commission or with in Berlin. So why spoil this nice cooperative relationship by saying you're corrupt, you need to reform?
Is there a deep state in Bulgaria that is hampering reforms, anti-corruption reforms?
Many of the elements of the problems that we see in Bulgaria are inherited from the communist time. You can argue that much of the structures that are allowing for the specific model of Bulgarian corruption are inherited from the communist time. Because corruption in Bulgaria is not just something in the air. It's fairly well organized. It's a fairly complex mechanisms that are allowing for abuse of power and abuse of public interest, and
happening under the nose of the European Union.
Yeah, and much of these practices, much of these structures, much of these social networks are going back. Their roots are in the communist times. You actually see that the top level operators of this system, you can call it the Vindevlet, you can call it mafia-like, you can call it capture state. There are many conceptual frameworks for explaining it, but the people that are on the top of it, their biographies are almost always leading towards the communist secret services. So it's fairly easy to say that there was an effort to, at the end of the communist regime, to sort of converge the power that they had into economic and media and institutional influence that will actually allow them to continue controlling the country.
Now, corruption is just one of many issues facing Bulgaria. The influx of thousands of refugees and migrants who've entered the country on their way to Western Europe is creating more tensions. Some people say they are afraid of outsiders and want to fortify Bulgaria's borders. They call it the revival movement. A throwback to what they say were better days. Nationalist music gives followers a sense of security in what they call uncertain times. The National Revival Movement says it wants Bulgaria to remain Bulgarian. And to this end, it wants Europe to stem the flow of migrants. Close to half of the nearly 2 million refugees and migrants who've entered Europe since 2011 entered through Bulgaria. 95% moved on, but the rest stayed. When Muhammad Jamal fled Aleppo in 2013, his children and his scissors were the only valuables he was able to smuggle out into Turkey. 6 years later, he owns this barber shop in Sofia.
I stayed in Turkey for 3 months in 2013. Then I got the opportunity to go to Europe, and my luck was Bulgaria.
When he set off for Europe, Jamal had to leave his children in Turkey. It took 4.5 years for the family to be reunited.
I brought my children to Bulgaria because their father is here, and my life and future is here. And my children's future is tied to their fathers.
Jamal's story is an exception in Europe's refugee saga. It was his choice to remain in Bulgaria. Others have been forced to return. And that's created a problem years later, says Mariana Stoyanova. She's responsible for refugee affairs at the Bulgarian Red Cross. According to latest figures, 400 refugee families have been deported to Bulgaria from elsewhere in Europe since 2013.
They are deported. They don't want to come back to, for example, to Bulgaria. I suppose it's similar across the region in member states of the European Union. And It's really a big trauma for the parents, but also for kids especially, when after spending 2-3 years in a country like Germany or Austria, they are forced to return in a country where there is almost nothing in place. The challenges are a lot. The first challenge is where to learn Bulgarian language. Also, it is quite difficult for those people to find a job, mainly because of their educational profile. Another challenge is that usually the women, they are not willing to start working. They have their traditional role as taking care of the family. For Bulgaria, if the husband has a low-paid job and the woman is not working, it's absolutely impossible to pay the rent and cover all the daily needs. So these are big challenges.
This reverse migration has galvanized nationalist forces. They're afraid the returning migrants will bring trouble. Leading the charge against the migrants is the VMRO political party. It has its roots in Bulgarian nationalism dating back to Ottoman Macedonia and has seen its fortunes rise along with Europe's refugee crisis. Angel Jambaski is considered one of its up-and-coming stars. The 39-year-old has been active in politics since he was 18. He now represents VMRO at the EU Parliament on an anti-migrant platform which he calls Fortress Europe.
We want to define Europe, to define where is the border, where is the end of Europe. Because we are not, for example, political nation as, for example, United States or Canada, we discussed this before. We are ethnical nation, and Europe, this part of Europe is very ethnic. So it's not a multicultural question here.
You've got such a rich history of different religions in this country.
13 centuries.
Isn't Bulgaria unique in this multi-religious cultural identity? And shouldn't that inform Bulgaria's view of Europe, of Turkey, of the world?
In fact, Bulgaria is a very ethnic nation, one of the most ethnic nations in Europe now. So we consider our fellow and our brothers from, for example, a Muslim religion or Catholics, we consider they are Bulgarians, and they recognize themselves as Bulgarians. They say we are Bulgarians, and then we are Orthodox, Catholic, Muslim,
and that's what's
Jewish.
most important for you.
Yes, for us, and this is the main difference between our nationalism and, for example, religious movements or religious orientated ideologies.
How does this fit into then this whole idea Europe is grappling with, an influx of migrants, refugees? Do you think there's something Europe can learn from Bulgaria?
Yes, to respect roots and to protect roots and history, and not to demand at any price from everyone to be multicultural or to be very migrants welcome, etc., etc. So, because you have your own traditions, your roots, your history, your family, you have to protect them.
So you agree with this general trend of, there is a rise of nationalism across Europe. Are you part of this trend?
Yes, and this is not bad. This is not bad because we were in the left for a very long time, in the far left. It was left not only communism, but it was left in social life, in family relations, in society. It's left.
Where do you see Bulgaria in the next 10 years? It's been 10 years in the EU. Where do you see the EU? Where do you see Bulgaria?
Well, we hope so, I believe.
Do you see it being treated with more respect?
We will succeed in this, I'm sure. I see Bulgaria in different European Union, a stronger European Union, less regulated, so borders, free market, respect of traditions. This is our European Union.
So we've seen what Bulgarians from across the political and social spectrum have to say about their country, but what is the government's position? Well, I sat down with Bulgaria's Deputy Prime Minister, Tomislav Donchev, and asked him what his government was doing to address concerns about corruption and the rise of nationalist sentiments that could go against its EU aspirations. In your opinion, do you think there are double standards in how European Western powers deal with Bulgaria as opposed to other member states?
I am a politician, not an analyst, so I can't comment on double standards as you describe it. But here I can highlight that Bulgaria is committed to a full integration within the Eurozone and the Schengen zone. And of course, all this needs to happen according to the EU acquis and the relevant procedures and regulations, which take a little bit of time. We have high expectation as we are bound by the EU acquis to accede to the Eurozone. However, there are certain political processes that also need to take place. But Bulgaria is absolutely ready to accede, and we are now working in that direction.
It seems that Bulgaria and Turkey are on the same page when it comes to trying to convince the European Union. You're already in the EU. Turkey has been trying to get in the EU since 2005. What lessons do you think Bulgaria can offer Turkey in its process or in its commitment to join the European Union?
The European Union is a very complex organism and doesn't necessarily take decisions quickly. Of course, all the decisions taken in the end are the right ones, but they don't necessarily happen quickly.
How do you see your relationship with center-right political forces like VMRO?
That is actually characteristic of coalitions. They are made up of various parties. If they weren't different, they wouldn't be in a coalition. So often have divergent views on issues that is not something that is out of the ordinary. It is absolutely normal. It would be suspicious if we always agreed.
Well, some would say it could be suspicious to be in partnership with groups that are openly hostile to Romas and Gypsies and migrants and refugees, that want Bulgaria for Bulgarians, Bulgaria first, Fortress Europe, they say.
We shouldn't be surprised by criticism. There is often criticism from within the EU itself, from left and right, from a Eurocentric or Eurosceptic groups and persons. Criticism exists within the EU itself. Criticism is part of democracy, and it actually makes us better, makes us stronger. As far as I'm informed about Turkey and the migrants and refugees it's been hosting, I know that the authorities have gone to great effort to see that the migrants stay in their territory and are strictly regulated.
Is corruption a big issue in Bulgaria, in your opinion? And what can be done to counter or contain this?
Corruption is fought through our strong legislation, then transparency and accountability. Our aim is for there to be full transparency and accessibility of information relating to the national and regional budgets, to spending, to public tenders, and all the other information that would be relevant that any citizen would be interested in. That is why we recently also adopted an anti-corruption law, and it is now to be seen how effectively it will be implemented.
Where does Bulgaria place itself with so many competing interests? Is it confused about its mindset? And what could be done to bring Bulgarians back, to stem this decline in numbers?
The main problem is rather the Bulgarians who decided to leave the country and work in other countries. It's not a surprise, because for 50 years during the communist times, Bulgarians did not have the freedom to travel. Over the past couple of years, the statistics have shown that for every 2 people that have left the country, 1 has returned. I'm sure that for every 2 people, at least 2 come back.
Do you think Europe gives Bulgaria some sort of protection and an independence that away from Russia and Turkey?
If we start throwing historical arguments at each other, that means we are prone to miss the aspects of the current day. Here I'll say that history has made us neighbours, and as neighbours we have to be friends. The way I've been taught, if there is a problem, we discuss it. If necessary, we quarrel. But then in the end, we come to resolve it. As we say in Bulgaria, the neighbor is perhaps more important than the brother, because the brother you can see once a week, but your neighbor every day.
Deputy Prime Minister, thank you so much. And that's all for this special edition of Strait Talk from Bulgaria. If you've got any comments or suggestions, do share them with us at #StraightTalk. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.